fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. Got Luke, got Otis walking through the background here. For those of you listening, we're doing a podcast today all about artificial shrimp. Artificial shrimp. Been around a long time, been a lot of brands. And we found one in particular that is outperforming all the other ones, not 100% of the time. And we want to preface this, right, Luke? There's no perfect lure. There's no perfect bait. There's no perfect anything for 100% of every single scenario. But when you have the best for that particular scenario, and we're going to talk through that. When do you want to use an artificial shrimp? What to look out for? We've learned over the last few years, there's certain types of shrimp you want to avoid, and some of them sold by some pretty big manufacturers. And also ultimately how to rig them and use them. Because if you're not using the proper depth control, if you're not getting your artificial shrimp in the strike zone, you ain't going to catch any fish. So first and foremost, Luke, I see you there looking through your little Plano tackle tray. Let's kind of talk about the history of shrimp, and we're obviously going to reveal what the shrimp is that we believe is the most consistent overall and for inshore saltwater fishing. And then we'll talk about rigging it, some mistakes, et cetera. So what's the history? Because we've been using different shrimps for a long, long time. I mean, back in the day, you had some, I don't think these companies are even around anymore. There's been companies like D.O.A. and some others that have been around for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, where I started with shrimp was D.O.A. shrimp. It's probably the most popular. It's pretty much like at all Walmarts and pretty much all tackle stores for that matter. You know, they come pre-rigged, so it's easy. Like anybody can do it. And it works, right? It does work. The problem with and there's a lot of other pre-rigged shrimp out there. And again, they all work. The problem with those is that they're more for newbies, I would say, because it's pre-rigged. There's less room for air. The downside of that is that there's really no customization for, I would say, the moderate to advanced angler who is comfortable with doing some slight tweaks to the rig so that they can cover different depths. And depth control is, I would say, even more important than lure in many cases. If you're not getting the right depth, even if you're using live bait, you're not going to catch anything. And so having the depth control is a very, very big deal. And that's one reason why I started going to other shrimp lures. So after the D.O.A. one, it worked okay, but never got like just true consistent results. Then I moved over to gulp shrimp. So gulp shrimp doesn't look realistic at all. It's just you have to rig it yourself. So it's not quite for total newbies, but it's pretty easy and it stinks. It has its benefit is very good scent. And started catching way more fish with gulp shrimp than I ever did with D.O.A. shrimp. So I stopped. I haven't used D.O.A. shrimp really for quite a while, except for doing some lure tests every so often. But so gulp shrimp's great, but it doesn't look good at all. It doesn't look realistic at all. And so then one of our members, his name is Marcos, from Brazil, he introduced us to these shrimp made in Brazil. And over there, snook is a very, very popular species. They have big tournaments and like shrimp is the ultimate lure. So like the Brazilians have put, I'm sure, way more emphasis on shrimp lures than anybody else. I feel like you go to tackle store here, it's like spoons, it's mostly bait fish imitation, and then the little shrimp, there'd be like a couple of shrimp options. There it's like all shrimp, that's all they care about. And
it's like, just so you guys know, it's like bass fishing in America, the robalo / snook down in Brazil. I mean, these people have essentially bass boats. They're just completely the lightest weight flats boats you can imagine, with 300 horsepowers on a little 20-foot boat, no T-tops, no towers, no nothing. This is all just hardcore gunning because there's big money on the line. I mean, they have absolutely perfected the shrimp for catching snook and really all kinds of inshore species. They have different types of jacks and snappers, but the snook is like their largemouth bass. I mean, it's a big money deal down there.
Yeah, and so what got our attention is part of the membership, our Insider Club membership, is we have a community. It's the private community. It's kind of like Facebook, but there's no political junk, and it's basically like a Facebook on steroids when it comes to fishing, where you can sort it by region, you can sort it by species, you can see what everybody's catching, you can interact with everybody, and Marcos just kept posting these giant snook, and just week after week after week, and we keep seeing them like, dang, Marcos, what are you doing, man? And I kept talking about the shrimp lure. And so I was like, he's catching all these on lures. So we ended up chatting with him, and we had the opportunity to fish with him. And it goes down to Everglade City. And I was mind blown. And we've grown up, Joe. We've been going down to the Marco, 10,000 Islands area for like as long as I can remember. And we caught a lot of big fish down there. But for snook fishing down there, how we grew up is the snook bite is, you get out there at 5 a.m. and you fish till about 30 minutes after sunrise. Basically, the bite is like right at twilight. You have to be ready for it. And then at night, you get out there like 30 minutes before dark, and then you fish a couple hours after dark. And I can count on my hand how many, like, I would say overslot snook we caught in the middle of the day down there growing up after many, many years of going down there, even doing a lot of live bait fishing, which is what we used to do most often. So we go down there with Marcos. A storm came. Skeptical as can be. Yeah, skeptical as be, and had no idea what we're getting ourselves into. And he turned out he's just such a nice person, and it was an amazing trip. But fishing wise, absolutely blew me away. I've never seen it before, and what we're using, and he does a lot of these on the reefs, and he's been joining tournaments down there, competing against live bait anglers, and he's winning a lot of the tournaments. 100% lures, 100% shrimp lures. And what he's doing is he's taking this a realistic shrimp lure that's made in Brazil, and we now are selling them. They're called power prawns, and he's putting a big heavy jig on there, like a half ounce. In many cases, even heavier if the winds are bad or the currents are bad, and he's just bouncing them along the reefs, and the snook just can't turn it down. It is remarkable. And so we went out there, we fished a couple inshore spots. And, we caught, I think we caught like a couple snook and one redfish. Nothing was giant. And so I was kind of like, oh man, like we just missed the best part of the day. We kind of woke up a little bit late. Like they had like a huge dinner for us. We started eating like at 10 at night or something. So we didn't have much sleep, slept a little bit. And then we got out to the reef at like 10 o'clock or something. Right, Joe? It was like middle of the day. It was getting hot.
It's hot. Yeah.
And so he pulls out of this reef, and he's like, yeah, you have to go for the bigger jig heads. So I think I had a half ounce, maybe a 3/4 ounce. And so we started just casting, just hey, the reef's over there, kind of cast around it. And all of a sudden we just started like Joe, I think Joe hooked up first, and it was like a 40-inch snook. And it's middle of the day, like I was totally dumbfounded. And then it just kept happening. I've never seen that many big fish caught on lures in the middle of the day. I've never seen that many big fish caught even on live bait in the middle of the day. It was mind blowing.
Yeah. And so that was the first, like, holy smokes, this thing's work. But, we're in 20 feet of water. So, and we're like, all right, well, let's see how this works inshore, right? Because for the most part, us, our audience, you guys, our Insider Club, even though we do nearshore and offshore stuff, it's mostly inshore fishing, right? And so then guess what happens? We're like, okay, cool. We go inshore. And so we go like 20 miles to now hit inshore where we can literally see the land. And obviously we had to downsize our weights, our lead, and the same thing starts happening. I mean, we're catching fish after fish after fish, including redfish, including trout. We kind of slammed. It was just like, what the heck is going on? All on the same lure, the same shrimp lure, which is, if you guys don't know, so we believed in this so much. We got in touch with Marcos, who grew up in Brazil and obviously has been buying these things there. He and his wife Luana. And we ended up getting exclusive rights to this manufacturing plant. So it's kind of like, I would say like paddle tails, for instance. There's a lot of paddle tails out there. There's a couple brands that for the most part own 90% of all of the paddle tail sales in the country. It's kind of similar there in Brazil. There's tons, like Luke said, if you go to a tackle store there in Brazil, you're going to see all kinds of shrimp. There's 3 really big brands that own it. And we got one of them. So we have the exclusive rights in America. The only people that could sell this exact same mold, exact same features on this which is why we call it power prawn. The thing flat out works. And hopefully you got some footage too we're going to look at, right?
Yeah, so this is a really cool story. This is that day we went inshore, and we were at this point. Let me pull this thing up so you can see. I'll show for those who are watching. You can see this is amazing. So we're at this point. We're catching a bunch of snook, and Marcos is talking about some shark repellent that sometimes he has to put shark repellent in because the sharks are trying to steal his fish. And I was kind of like, "What are you talking?" I've never really heard about an issue to that capacity. And so we're at this spot, and we kept catching a bunch of snook. Again, the whole time I was mind blown. And Joe had a big one on. It broke off. Some sharks were in the area, so I think we got sharked once. And there was actually a shark that was chasing a snook all along, right up here along all these fallen trees on the shoreline. So we saw a bunch of commotion. We could see a shark in there. It looked like it was trying to get, we were kind of like, oh man, it was probably trying to get that, one of those snook that we released. And then all of a sudden, this snook was up on the surface swimming toward the boat. It was kind of like, you could tell it was very tired, and it has to have been the snook that shark was chasing. It probably got away, and then bewildered somehow ended up out here in the middle. And so it's free swimming. And so it came right to the boat. And let me play this so can you hear it, Joe?
Yep.
Oh, look at it.
You catch with the net.
So Marcos nets it. Well, yeah, so Marcos nets it. Well, let me go back. And so this is all happening. And then Luana's in the back of the boat hooking into a giant snook. The whole day was insane. And this
keep showing. So you remember, so right before that, I'm trying to I have my shrimp lure in front of the snook's face. I see the snook coming at the boat. And I'm like, what is going on? So I toss my shrimp lure. You can see my lure. I'm dangling it. Marcos grabs it. So keep going. You're about to see the power prawn in its mouth.
Yeah. So Marcos grabs it. So let's check the snook's mouth to see if the lure's in there. So I'll go ahead and play it straight right here.
That is awesome.
It's a big snook too.
Tree swimmer. That's unheard of, dude. No way. Are you on too? Oh, that's crazy.
My gosh.
That's a good snook.
Is that the one that I had hooked? There's no lure in this mouth. Oh,
No way.
that is
No way. What are the odds?
That is the snook that I was fighting. Did you see that? Did you feel that?
So I think I take it off.
Is the GoPro running right now?
I hope so. Yeah, it is.
Yes.
That was so cool.
So I pulled out and that was 100% the same exact lure. It was just really neat. And again, that's just the middle of the day. And that was after multiple other overslot snook were caught. And then we kept catching more afterwards. It was insane.
So the story gets even a little bit more interesting. You guys saw Luana on the back. So Marcos, they're both insider members. Marcos is the one that does all the posting, and he's always got, his wife in there, and she's always catching monster fish too. It turns out she's like a celebrity over in Brazil for fishing, for catching monster snook. She's on little billboards and stuff over there. And she's got this massive following on Instagram and some other social media apps, none of it's in English. And she even had her own fishing TV show. So she was one of the first female anglers to have her own fishing TV show over there. So these two know what they're doing clearly. And this is all they're using. And so if you go follow her, and we'll put a link in the show notes to their Instagram page. And if you're a member, you can obviously see all Marco's posts on the Insider Club. I mean, almost every single one of their reports is with this power prawn, with this shrimp. So, we come home that day and we're just like, what in the world did we just witness here? And still somewhat skeptical, I'll be honest, because, we were there in South Florida, maybe this only works here. And Mark was like, no, I've been all over Florida. It works everywhere. And so we still hadn't pulled the trigger. It was a couple months before, we actually pulled the trigger and got the exclusive rights to import these and then to sell them. And so Luke will talk about what happened. So we started, getting a bunch of samples in. We're sending out to some of our top peeps and obviously our fishing coaches. And Tony starts reporting holy smokes, this is killing it. At the time, Wyatt's in North Carolina. And he's like, this is outperforming my voodoo shrimps and stuff, the shrimps that he loves. And it was just maddening, in a crazy world, what is happening here? How is this shrimp from Brazil beating out the D.O.As and the voodoos and all the other ones out there? And I still don't know what's exactly that special about it. We've got a few ideas, And we'll also talk about some things, to look out for and not to do. But what are your thoughts? Like, why does this thing work so well in so many different scenarios?
Well, I mean, for the deep water stuff, because we start off with the deep water, and so let's focus there, and it's proven to be extremely good. And the shallow water is a whole different rigging, but it's the same lure can be used for it. Very good there too. For the deep stuff, it's basically how I eventually kind of perceived it, and how I use it is it's basically a bucktail on steroids, where bucktail is probably the number one most popular lure ever. Right, they flat out work. But it has good motion in the water. But when a fish gets up close to it, it's not nearly as realistic as a very well proportioned and realistic looking shrimp lure. And it has the same good action in the water. But then when that bigger fish gets up close to it, it's now going to be more likely to eat. And so I've kind of basically stopped using bucktails since finding these lures. And this is it always works in a bucktail type situation, and again, but it just works better.
So explain that, because there's maybe some people who aren't fishing with bucktails or haven't, because that's what we started off with down in South Florida and Marco, is using a bucktail, and you're basically popping that sucker off the bottom. So talk about how you're jigging it. Talk about that just real quick so everyone knows what you're saying.
Yeah, and so it's really just a bounce off the bottom. So most of the feeding happens on the bottom, right? That's where most of the predator fish are. We're talking about snook, redfish, sea trout, obviously flounder included. And so this does a really good job of just getting down there and bouncing off the bottom. It captures their interest. Just the movement captures their interest. It'll get right there in the bottom, right in their face. And when they come up to examine it, it looks realistic. And so what I found to be the ultimate is to use this lure and then put some scent on it. Like we have the Dr. Juice. I started using ProCure, and then the Dr. Juice, they reached out to us. They want to do a custom saltwater scent. Like, sure, like send to us and we'll try it. And if it works, we'll offer that too. And been blown away by that. So this plus that Dr. Juice scent has been the ultimate combo. So now, again, I mentioned before that I went to gulp shrimp, and that's what I was using when I was tournament fishing over in the Indian River over there on the east coast of Florida. And so now, after experiencing this, I've totally stopped using gulp shrimp because this has been just outperforming
by far.
Plus it's super strong. So the gulp's just frustrating. They got really soft, and this is that TPE material. So even though this tail is designed to have really good action, I mean, you can really put some pressure on it, and it's not gonna bust. You can catch a ton of fish per lure. So long story short, as far as the retrieve, and we have, for anybody who does buy this, we have an entire mini course that goes over the retrieve, the equipment used, all video courses, and you can ask questions and all that stuff. And obviously the rigging stuff is very important. So there's detailed video tutorials on every one of the important things, even the hook set. On how to do a proper hook set. In that video, I was out dock fishing. I literally caught 10 fish and 10 casts during the how to do a hook set video. It was crazy. Yeah. It has been really impressive with how it's been doing. So particularly when shrimp are running, obviously that's when this is gold. But even really throughout the year, I've been now using it for 12 months. If the water is really murked up and just a lot of bait fish in the area, this won't be the slam shady, right? A paddle tail on a jig head will win. But when the water is calm and clear, and especially if the shrimp are running, that's when this thing is dynamite. So again, just like Joe said earlier, this isn't like hey, that you get this lure and that's all you use ever, and you're trouble. You're going to be catching more fish than ever. No, that's never going to be the case. But that kind of calm, clear conditions, even out on the reefs, like we were fishing this in 70 feet of water, catching red snapper, red grouper, and even cobia out there, and albacore jacks. Like it was insane. Like I've still kind of new to this. We've been using this lure now for like a year and a half, but I'm just been continually impressed with it, and even blown away on the variety of situations where it works.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was probably a year and a half. It was definitely all pre-COVID. Yes, it has been a long time since we were there. Here, I'll let you know a little secret. So why we're fishing with Marcos, he basically, in the one they basically have two versions of this exact same shrimp. Okay. The one that you just saw there, like the one with that one you just showed, and all the reef big snook, we had a couple pictures that I posted. They actually weren't with this. And here's why. I'm just going to completely be candid. So Marco said, you guys have a choice. You can either use this one, because I guarantee if we ask most, and if you guys are listening, I'm holding up this lure and it's got this perforated tail. Is that the right word? Segmented tail, where it's got little segments in it. Most anglers, when we started saying, hey, well, like, what do you think's the best feature? They're like, oh man, it's that tail. Here's the truth. It didn't matter at all. And in fact, all those fish, the bigger fish, were caught on this exact same mold without this the segmented tail. It was literally just one big piece. And I thought that was really intriguing. And so that's, we've got some underwater pool footage that we haven't released yet, but we've been looking at the two of them, and it's tough to tell the difference, even in super slow-mo. But it's funny. I mean, it goes back to what sells people. Marcos even says, you know what, guys, to be honest with you, it doesn't matter. Like the mold is what works. It's this profile. This thing works. The tail, everything about this just flat out works. But you're probably going to sell more if you have the perforated tail, just because fishermen are fishermen, and they're gonna end up going for what looks cool and what they think works. But that was an aha moment. We wanted to share that with you. I think we were on the call earlier with one of our members. I just love you guys are authentic and you tell it like it is. But that was the reason we chose this over the other one. We're probably going to release another one that's just one big segment, if you will, and you'll be shocked. Like I was shocked because I had that same. Marcos is showing us this big tackle bag is literally 100% like all these shrimp. And I'm like, oh, I want the one with the segmented tail. He's like, you'd probably catch more in the spot with the flat tail. And I thought that was, what do you think, Luke? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you forgot an important detail on the mold in particular that we went with. It has a segmented tail, which as we now know, doesn't really matter, right? Most importantly, it has the cavity, the underbelly cavity, so you can rig it weedless on top of doing the jig head. That's why we went to this one. That's the unique feature that nothing else in the USA right now that has this TPE material has the underbelly. So that's the biggest reason, and for that reason, that's why I personally call it the ultimate shrimp lure, because we can rig it with this big jig head, cover 5 feet of water, 15 feet of water, up to 70 feet of water that we've used this in. But then we can also get up on the flats, rig it weedless, and now you have that underbelly cavity so that you have good hook sets when you're rigged weedless for 12 inches of water, right? No other shrimp has that versatility that I found so far. Like Monster has some shrimps, just I've tested out pretty much all of them. Monster comes the closest, but yeah, they don't, at least as of now, they don't have that underbelly. And that's just what really makes it more well-rounded, where you can use it for everything. So now I basically just have these shrimp lure, the shrimp molds, and I just carry the weedless stuff, the jig heads, even some weedless jig heads that we found that works great. And now I'm literally ready for whatever depth we're covering.
Yep. Dr. Juice, Power Prawn, unstoppable in most scenarios. So we talked about offshore. Let's now move it more inshore. You and I first started using this inshore on just little docks, right? In 5 to 8 feet of water. That worked amazing. Obviously, you're going to tone it down in terms of the weight. You don't need a half ounce. You still want it to be on the bottom. That part is critical. But then Luke started catching it in 3 feet of water, started killing it. And then we even downgraded the shrimp size a little bit. So we've got, the Power Prawn, which is the 2-pack of those big boys. And then the Power Prawn Junior, which is slightly smaller, and you get 3 of them. So talk about that transition and going from a little bit deeper water to super, super skinny water using the sucker.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, it's all about just the stuff you rig it with. So for the shallow water to be weedless, again, this has been awesome. Where these are custom hooks. Where the problem with that with this setup, this material is really tough. So as far as the rigging, as I'll show you on this type of jig head, it's so strong. I'm literally having a hard time getting it out of there. But all it is this is just a little pin. Like this material. So let me put my hand in front of it. This material is so tough that just this little pin that holds it extremely well. As you saw there, the tough part, and we'll talk about, obviously we always talk about openly the pros and the cons. The tough part is that it's really tough to rig this on a normal jig head. Let me pull out like I'll pull out this. So if we're going weedless, right? If you want to rig it weedless on a Texas eye jig head, this material is so tough, it's really hard to get it over this little keeper thing. So the solution that I found is just I literally get some pliers and I rip off the keeper. So now it's just the hook, and this material has enough hold where it'll rig on this setup. It'll be weedless. Now I can dock fish and I can bounce right off those pilings without getting snagged, and I still have a good hookup ratio. Like this has been an amazing combo. And so even like, because we've been out of those weedless hooks forever, they've been very high demand. They're tough to get. So even when we don't have those weedless hooks in stock, a Texas eye jig head, just take off that little keeper thing on the bend of the hook, and now you're ready to go for the dock fishing.
Yep. So let's talk about a mistake, and this is the number one thing Marcos said that's going to hurt your chances with this. It's the rigging, right? I mean, it's the number one thing. He sees people on his boat. They do some guiding and stuff down there too. And this is all they use. And he said, the number one thing I watch people is they rig it wrong. On the flip side too, he said the number one issue about shrimp, he's like, knowing what I know now, he's like, I would never in a million years buy a shrimp that's pre-rigged. And nothing against D.O.A. Luke mentioned it. It's probably great for beginners, but it's the least versatile because it's pre-rigged. You can't take the sucker off without damaging it, and then you can't fish it in any other depth. I mean, if you have a pre-rigged shrimp, guess what? You're only fishing it effectively in one depth area. Whereas this, I mean, you took our dad out, and our dad is like super old school. And Dad, if you're listening, love you, but he's super old school, right? I mean, he's a gold spoon dude, has been for 50 years. That's what he uses. And then when he goes offshore to Rex, he's like, man, I'm using light bait. Why would I waste my time with a power prawn? And what happened? You have the picture or anything, or any?
So I can pull it up. Yeah, I took him out. This is like 3 weeks ago now. And I took him out there. I've been telling him about these power prawns, trying to get him to use them because they flat out work. And he's all right, well, just come down here. Let's go fishing and show me how these things work. And kind of like, I believe it when I see it thing. And so I took him out there, and I was literally just starting to show him. We get on this reef. It's 25 feet of water off of Boca Grande, and so this is the reef. There's like 4 or 5 boats on it every single day. We fished it a lot, and until a couple of years ago, we never even caught a snook there. But previously it was snook on live bait, and it was rare. And so I took him out there. I was catching a bunch of little grouper and stuff. We actually caught a keeper flounder right before this. And we caught a smaller flounder as well, which we've never caught on this reef ever, even with shrimp, with live shrimp, with a ton of live bait. Never once did we catch a flounder on that reef. We caught 2 that day. And also I look over and his rod's keeled over. Otis is going crazy. Dog Otis is on the boat. And this is the middle of the day on a weekend. And there was like hardly any wind. You can see it's super calm out there. You can see 2 boats fishing that same reef on the background. And it's real keeled over, and I was just like, oh, I got one. And so we followed it, and there, sure enough, it was about a 40-inch snook. We had that CCA tape measure that goes to 33 inches, and it went way beyond that. It went past the whole tape, which I think was 36, but it was like at least 4 inches longer than the entire tape. And you can see the power prawn sitting right there in its corner of the mouth.
And is that just like a Z-Man eye strike / jig head?
No, that was a power prawn jig head. So that was the power prawn one. Because again, the jig heads, if you have a jig head with the keepers, let me get my thing over here. This material is so tough that it's really hard to rig it. You can rig it on the eye strike, but you can see this eye strike for those watching and see it. The eye strike jigs and pretty much most jig heads have the keepers to hold soft plastic, and they stick out a lot. And this material is so tough that it's really tough to get them to rig up there. What works is literally this jig head with no keeper at all. The material is so tough And it's kind of like when something penetrates, it's kind of like a tacky material where the lure just sticks to the hook itself, and you really don't need a keeper. So the keeperless jig head is actually the easiest way to rig it. And so that's why, we do sell those. In a pinch, you can use the other ones. You just have to force it on there. And once it's on there, it is not coming off. So yes, you can use the Z-Man jig heads, the trout eyes. But just know
that's all I've been using with them. And I pinch the worm keepers down, the hook, whatever you guys call them. Yeah, little keepers down, just pinch them with pliers down. So going back to this, so the mistake Marcos and his wife says, like, never ever buy pre-rigged shrimp. Just don't do it. Yes, they can work if you're only going to fish one certain depth forever, but if you want versatility, which is what this whole thing's all about, and a more consistent overall lure where you can catch big fish in 2 feet of water or 25 or 70, which we're going to talk about next, because we went and did another experiment in a brand new area we'd never fished before here just this past 30 days in Carabel, Florida. This just adds so much more versatility instead of having to buy all these pre-rigged shrimp. And obviously when they're pre-rigged, they're more expensive. It's such a better deal to get shrimp independent and then rig them yourself. And when you have material like this, you can easily catch a fish. And then the next day or the next week, the next time you go out, take the thing off and put a new jig head or a new weedless hook on and be fishing in a few feet of water. Now, the mistake though, where I started with this is, Luke mentioned it earlier, having this little cavity is massive. So those other ones that Marcos had, they were tough. The best analogy I could tell you, because Marcos was like, "What's taking you so long?" I was like, "Dude, this is like the first time I learned to tie the FG knot. Like it takes a while, right? Because I was putting that jig head through all that material, and if it's not perfectly centered, and if it's not like, if it's looking like that, obviously it's going to be helicopter look like complete crap. You need to have that thing just perfectly flat, and it needs to be coming out in the perfect right spot, right down the middle. It's not going to work. And this little opening here for you listening, it's about an inch or so gap, and it goes all the way to the end. I mean, it literally takes all that material out of the way. It makes it so much easier to rig. I mean, night and day difference.
Yeah. And another mistake too, that I think a lot of people do with shrimp lures, and in particular those on the shallow water spectrum, actually really both, but particularly the shallow water spectrum, is a lot of these shrimp lures, we know it's, obviously it needs to look lifelike. And I think a lot of companies take it too far, where they start having all those extremities. So it'll have like all of the legs hanging down and then like whiskers shooting out. And that significantly impacts casting distance. And so that's why, because after trying a bunch of them and then using this one and then switching back to the other ones just to make sure that the results are better, it's painful every time I go to a different one that has all those extremities, because my casting distance goes down like 15-20%.
Yep.
And for those, particularly in shallow water, the further away the fish is, right, that's the best strike zone. And the closer to the boat, the more likely those fish are going to have no dangers in the area and be less likely to eat. So for that reason, those ones with all the extremities, yes, they look cool, but I have not yet seen them catch more fish than this. And if anything, it's been the opposite, because the casting distance better, and the action, just looking at the underwater footage of these lures, is that without all those extremities, the lure darts a lot better. So when you do your twitch, it twitches a little bit faster and it coasts a little bit further. And that seems to actually help with getting strikes. So for that reason, I now no longer use any of those lures with all the crazy extremities.
So you mentioned earlier, we started the whole conversation off by probably the two top selling shrimp lures of all time, D.O.A. and Gulp. How real do those things look? Not
D.O.A.
at all, right?
Yeah. D.O.A. was kind of real. I mean, it's mold, but they have those little extremities down there. You have the eye sticking out. Like it looks fairly real.
I'm talking about compared to the stuff you're talking about, where it's like, 3D graphics and the stuff where it's like, what? Why did I just pay $12 for one shrimp lure? And some of those things are more than that. It's nuts for one shrimp lure. And Luke's point is you don't need all that. Even this, I mean, it looks real, but I mentioned earlier, just being candid, like you don't have to have this perforated tail. I mean, does D.O.A have a perforated tail? Does Gulp? No. And the things flat out work. So you don't have to have this $12 crazy expensive shrimp lure. And I truly do believe sometimes that actually can hurt you. To Luke's point, besides the casting, which is an obvious one, just it doesn't even look right. It's not even popping off the ground right. I think the other part is size. We do have two sizes, but even this one, this is 4 3/4. It's almost a 5-inch shrimp, and doggone, I mean, this thing catches bigger fish in general. A lot of the Gulp shrimp are what, 3 1/4.
We have a 3 and a 4 inch. Yep.
Okay. So they're, for the most part, I think 3 is their top seller, a little bit smaller. Same with D.O.A, slightly smaller. So I also think too, there's once again, never a perfect lure for every single scenario, but for especially when you're going after these bigger fish in passes and cuts and bridges, docks, and even offshore, like we're going to talk about in a second, I'm personally going to go with the big boy. To catch bigger fish. And Marco said the same thing. I mean, they've been perfecting this now for a couple decades. We've been using it for 18 months. They've been doing this for decades. And he's like, man, I in general, I would go with the bigger one, with, a 4 to 4.5 to even almost a 5-inch shrimp. He's like, it just seems to attract the bites. It stands out. It's got a bigger profile. And when you rig it right and you're popping off the bottom right, it is irresistible for these fish. And when you add scent to it, which is that kind of bonus tip, like a Dr. Juice, this thing is outstanding. So that brings us to this recent trip. We went out there to Carabel, a place that Luke and I never fished. Wyatt's never fished. Wyatt joined us. And then Captain Mark Hollywood, who lives in the Keys, goes to Carabel once a year and fishes it. We're going to spots. He had literally lost his Simrad, right? Or the chip reset or whatever. So we're like just figuring it out, like literally just going to some mark spots that were public that he knew. And we're in anywhere from 45 to 70 feet of water. Mark's like, listen, guys, from everything I'm hearing from their captains here, it's cut bait. Like if you really want to catch snapper and grouper, we're going to have to start using, cut bait. So we got he's got this cleaning table in the back. And why he's rigging up all this stuff and Luke and Wyatt are rigging up, I'm in the front casting out an old power prawn, the big boy, loaded up with Dr. Juice. I catch the first fish. It was a flounder. And Mark's like, I've never even caught a flounder here. Then I catch another one. And all of a sudden we're catching snapper and grouper. And long story short, so we don't, turn this into a 2-hour podcast, the power prawn won for the day in terms of the most amount of species and total fish. It was beating cut bait, dropping it down on areas that had structure down there with lots of fish. And we're catching like keeper size gag grouper and snapper, big mangrove snapper, big red snapper. I mean, it was crazy how effective and versatile this was. Mark was like, holy, because he isn't using this stuff. He's kind of like dad. He's old school. And he's just like, all right, I'm buying some power prawns. Like that
he calls them worms. Yeah, I'll get a pack of those worms.
He calls anything that's made out of plastic just a worm. Sorry, Mark, if you're listening.
But also, I mean, I caught cobia.
I caught a cobia. That's right.
I caught a new grouper species I've never seen before. I think it was like the rock hind grouper or something like that. A really cool looking fish. But as Joe said, it's literally been the most impressive lure that I've come across in the recent past. Like it's. And we were literally dropping it straight down. I mean, sometimes we cast out 6 feet, but in general, literally just letting it go until we felt it hit bottom. With a 1/2 ounce would be kind of minimum. I had a couple 1 ounce jig heads until I ran out because we were having some shark issues as well, like in the either the power prawn or the fish that we had on as they were bringing it up. And we're just popping and just vertical jigging it essentially off the bottom. And these fish were hammering it. I'm talking like hammering it when there's cut bait right next to it, just sitting on the bottom. So it was really, really eye-opening. And that kind of just sealed the deal in terms of this, 1 year plus experiment on these artificial shrimp. Not only are we sold, I mean, this is all we use. You couldn't pay me to go back, especially I think I like D.O.A more than the Gulp, just because the Gulp, I had so many bad issues with those things leaking, and that juice absolutely reeks when it gets out in your tackle bag or wherever it might be.
But man, these things are just unstoppable. The toughest part's just been getting the stinking jig heads in, those weedless ones, because I really like those things.
Yeah, we have another batch coming in, should be before the end of the month. But yeah, I mean, long story short, there's a lot of shrimp lures out there. If you're not using shrimp lures, make sure to get some.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this one, obviously. I would say you probably should, because it's been pretty stinking awesome. And you can see a ton of videos. If you just go to saltstone.com and use the search feature, you can search for power prawn, and you'll see a ton of just footage of this thing flat out working for all sorts of species. You even actually see that course, and you can see the details on the rigging, on the equipment to use. And that was the most fun course to film, because I was literally catching fish while doing the lessons, where on the hook set one, just showing about how you do a single twitch, usually outperforms the double twitch. A single twitch, keep the rod tip up, let that shrimp glide down, and you'll feel that strike on the glide, and you just let them have it. And then in that lesson on the deeper water, I was fishing docks, caught multiple fish, and then I was doing the lesson for the weedless power prawn, right? Rigged on this the weedless jig, and same situation. I was fishing potholes up in about 1.5 foot water, and in the lesson, I caught like 4 trout that were all 20 inches plus or minus, like all legit trout. It was just awesome. It's just continued working. And so I know this probably sounds like a sales video, but this is just how impressive this lure has been. It's been remarkable.
Yeah, like I said, as soon as we kept seeing the proof time after time in different areas, that was when we're like, all right, we're calling the manufacturer and getting exclusive rights to this stuff, and we believe in it that much. So my question to you, Luke, is we have both. I think everyone should have both. The Power Prawn, I'm holding up the big boy, and then the Power Prawn Junior. Are you using the Junior, I assume, a little bit more for the inshore, like in shallower water, or do you care?
I've been using both. I've been using a lot of the juniors lately because I was out of the bigger ones, and we always have our members first. Like if we're running low on inventory, I just won't buy them and until we get some more. But for whatever reason, this small one, like all this triple tail I've been getting before this red tide happened, the 3-inch one, it seems like the triple tail loved it, and so this is like the Power Prawn Junior on a 1/4 ounce jig head has been dynamite for fishing for triple tail or grouper. I've been catching a bunch of sea bass, but going out and just pitching channel markers. It's the easiest fishing you could possibly do. You don't have to have a trolling motor, and you can catch some really good fish, and most importantly, some really good eating fish. And so I've just been going to channel markers and just getting 10 feet away, 15 feet away, and just pitching it and just cover every channel marker. Some are better than others, right? And I eventually figured out which ones hold the most fish. And in like a 30-minute span, I can go out and catch 10 fish pretty easily. Again, a lot of them are going to be like smaller sea bass and grouper, but I've been catching actually a lot of keeper sea bass. And every so often, a big triple tail will come smack it. So for that type of fishing, I like the smaller one. So basically, the smaller one gets you more quantity of fish. And then if you're going after quality, then obviously the bigger one, right? But if it's like wintertime, the smaller one would probably be a little bit better. But I was using both of them throughout the winter, and they both seem to work. So I think it's more about the target species, like going after mangrove snapper and the smaller groupers and stuff. The smaller one, definitely. But if you're going after snook, reds, trout, and you want to weed out some of the smaller ones, then just go ahead and get that big one.
Or big grouper and big snapper, like on these wrecks. And you think if you're fishing a wreck, have some of these. It's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. And I mean, as Captain Mark saw, he's like, man, I don't even know why I messed with all this bait, getting my boat all dirty. So I've just used Power Prawn. So hope that was helpful. Like I said, it probably did come off as a sales pitch, because you should buy some of these, lots of them, while we have them. And so we launched the first couple of rounds to insiders only. And that's always, our promise is insider members, it's the foundation, it's our family. It's who we are as a company. It's the Insider Club. And so we opened that up really for the first eight or so months. And we kept hearing from so many people like, hey, I want to buy them before I join. And it's helped us get a lot more members, honestly, which is another reason we just hit 25,000 members. And so we open it up to the public. Of course, insiders get 20% off. So it makes it a no-brainer when you're buying tackle at our store. As an insider member, you get 20% off or more on everything in the store. And but for now, if you're public and you're still on the fence about joining, that's okay. We know we'll get you and you'll join the family at some point. We'd love to get some of these in your hand. It's at fishstrong.com. Search for Power Prawn. If you're in the show notes, you'll see a link to it. They are fantastic. As we started this thing off, no, there's not one perfect lure. Even Slam Shady. I mean, I'm not fishing a Slam Shady in 70 feet of water, right? I mean, but this in general, if you're going to use an artificial shrimp, which, as Luke said, you should definitely have one in your arsenal, it should be this. And I would get a pack or two of each of these bad boys. And if we are out of the jig heads when you're looking, because they're really tough to find out there, and I don't think anyone has those anywhere on the market, I've been just using the normal Z-Man jig heads and just getting some pliers and pushing down those little worm keepers. And it's been working great. And as Luke said, once it's on there, once you rig it right, even if you mess up, this stuff's so good, so strong, you could rip it out and try it again 15 times if you need to. But once it's on there, right, I mean, it's on there. Like once you really jam it down, it ain't going anywhere. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And when, for everybody who does order them, we email out a link to that lesson, or it's a series of lessons on just how to make sure you're maximizing your results. And so it goes over all the rigging. Obviously, it goes over the rigging on the jig heads and stuff that go with it, because they're just the easiest. But also there's videos on alternative options. So we cover, like Joe mentioned, the trout eyes where you can mash down the barbs a little bit. Even for the weedless, for going weedless, instead of this pin type situation, you can use like an owner twist lock. You just have to like actually trim the lure a little bit just to make sure that the hydrodynamics are good. And once you do that, it actually works really good. It's a little bit tougher to rig, but if it works. And so since the rigging stuff has been just hard to get a hold of, it's just crazy how hooks, the simplest hook is really hard to inventory. We do have the alternative solutions for you. And so, just make sure to keep an eye out. Right after you order, you'll see an email that'll talk about the course for these power prawns.
Yep. And like I said, this stuff's so stinking strong. You got a rig, it ain't going anywhere, and you can catch, I mean, Marcus's guys catch dozens, sometimes 100 fish. I mean, it's tougher than the Z-Man material. The one place you could possibly lose it, I mean, nothing's safe with pufferfish when you got tails like that. I mean, we've seen that happen a few times. And obviously, if you get sharked or broken off, then that's the only other time you're going to use it. So these things will catch a lot of fish. And like I said, come join us in the club if you're not a member already at saltstrong.com. And then fishstrong.com is the tackle store where all of our Salt Strong Insider members get 20% off for more everything in the store. So guys, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. If you have questions, we're going to, just like all the times, we put this in the fishing tips section at saltstrong.com, and we have an area to leave comments. We'd love to hear from you. So if you have any questions, thoughts, any other shrimp, because I mean, we sell a lot of shrimp. We even sell D.O.A, and I think we have Gulp still in stock. And I think we had Voodoo for a while. We sell other shrimp. We're still unbiased. I guess it's not true. Everyone's biased because we like stuff that works, but we're still independent. I mean, we're still going to keep selling all this stuff. But personally, if you're asking us, because we have to buy this ourselves, we use the same discount that you guys do. I'm buying power prawns. Luke's buying power prawns. Our fishing coaches are buying power prawns. That could kind of tell you something there. And we're all getting the same 20% off. Our dad now, our old 72-year-old dad's buying power prawns. Captain Mark buying power prawns. Everyone who's seeing this thing work in action is now buying the power prawns. Free to buy whatever else at the site and buy all the D.O.A you want. But if I were you, I'd be checking this bad boy out and put them side by side. We've had quite a few members who have done that. A couple have put some videos out there, which I thought was pretty cool. Just trying these things out side by side, and this thing consistently gets more strikes and certainly more versatile than anything I've seen out in the market. So hope that was helpful. Once again, if you have any questions or thoughts or other shrimp lures you want us to test out, we're dying to try stuff. We love that. So please do let us know at saltstrong.com. Luke, anything else?
I'll say one thing we didn't even talk about is the rattle cavity too. That is another unique.
Oh, snap. Geez, that could be a whole other podcast.
Yeah, it does have a rattle cavity. And so that's just, again, another network. And so we have these rattles called battle rattles. That's what I've been putting in there. They seem to work. I mean, the rattles, I think they are helpful in some situations. Many, they don't really matter. Like most of like Dad's Big Snook, we weren't using rattles. We were down at Everglade City, we weren't using rattles. So just a cool feature. But if you're in darker water, you might want to consider the rattles.
That's what I would say.
If you're in the clear water, you probably just get away with not having them. But at least you have the option. So you can easily put them in there.
Yep. Cool, guys. Check it out at fishstrong.com, and then saltstrong.com is where you join us and the 25,000 other amazing members. Peace. We out. Talk to you in the next episode.
See ya.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days of old. Find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fishing in our soul.